Welcome back to another Fusion 360 tutorial. Today we are on day 6 and today we are going to learn how to make this 3D printable detachable cable organizer within Fusion 360. So with that said, let's get started. Okay, so to get started, let's go ahead and create a new component by going over to create, new component, and let's go ahead and name this component to 3D printable cable organizer. After that's done, press OK. From here, we need to create another component, which is going to be two parts. So for example, we're going to have the part for the top and as well as the part for the bottom that actually detaches or that swivels around the cable organizer. So from here, let's go ahead and create a new component and let's name this to base. After that's done, let's go ahead and create a sketch. So let's hover over to create sketch, select the bottom plane, and from here, what we need to do is to create two circles. So the first circle is going to be a center diameter circle from the origin. Drag this out. This is going to be 90 millimeters. Again, another circle from the origin. This is going to be 25 millimeters. After that's done, what we want to do now is extrude this newly created profile, pressing E on our keyboard, selecting this outside profile, and then changing the dialog box settings on the right hand side. What we need to change here is the direction from one side to two sides. Side 1 is going to be listed as 5 millimeters and side 2 is going to be listed as 1 millimeter. After that's done, press OK. The next thing we need to do here is to create an offset for this inner ring shown in our canvas here. So from here, let's go ahead and press O on our keyboard and selecting this top face here. What we want to do now is select this outer line, this outer edge here, and dragging this into about 5 millimeters. After that's done, finish sketch. From here, let's go ahead and extrude this newly created profile by pressing E on our keyboard and just dragging this up to about 18 millimeters and make sure the operation is set to join. After that's done, press OK. Now what we need to do is to create these little lips or these little hooks that are going to attach to this very top piece here. That's going to hook to the top part that we are going to make later on in the video. So from here, in order to do that, let's go ahead and press O on our keyboard once more and selecting this very top face that we just made here. And now we should be within this top-down view within our canvas. From here, selecting this outer edge, drag this out to about 2.5 millimeters and press OK. Now what we want to do here is to create a total of 3 lines. The first line is going to be from the origin going all the way to the very top. The second line is going to be from the side and make sure this is parallel to this line here. And lastly, this line here. And if by any chance these are not straight or at a 90-degree angle, meaning they're going straight up, you can select the parallel line constraint in the top menu bar here and selecting this line, this line, this line, and this line, and then you should see these little 2 parallel icons show on your lines. And since these were already parallel before adding that constraint, you'll see those in error shown at the very bottom right. From here, let's go ahead and set up some dimensions by pressing D on our keyboard, selecting this outer line here. This dimension here is going to be set to 5.5, and then this one on the right hand side, this one's going to be set to 5 millimeters. After that's done, finish sketch. Now from here, we should see that we have a total of basically a couple of new profiles created. What we're really looking for is this outer edge here because this is what we're going to essentially be using, these 2 outer profiles. But more or less, we're going to be prepping up our design for the bottom and as well as prepping the design for the bottom or for the top using this sketch. So from here, let's go ahead and select this piece here, this outside piece. This is the line that has 5 millimeters in width. Selecting E on our keyboard, drag this down, and we're going to drag this down by about 2 millimeters. Make sure if it's going up, you can just type in -2. You'll see it goes down. Make sure the operation is set to join and press OK. Next, what we want to do is add a chamfer for this piece here. And the reason for this is because since we're going to be 3D printing this, we want to reduce the likelihood of having to use supports. So in order to reduce that chance, we can add a chamfer to kind of even out the way this is going to be going upwards when we 3D print it. So for example, if we press S on our keyboard, type in chamfer, we can select this edge here and this inside edge here, And we could just drag this in to about 1.25 millimeters. And now you can see that this edge is basically curved out. Like if you were to print this going up, your printer should print this overhang with no issue, and you will not really need supports for this. So this is what it should look like for your design so far. One additional note to add here is that since we created an offset for this design here, that means that offset is going to be parallel to the circle in here. So meaning that this is also going to revolve around like a circle and not just like a rectangle that we added on the outside, if that makes sense. So from here, let's go ahead and create a couple of more of these features. So by pressing S on our keyboard, type in circular pattern. Let's go ahead and select the last two features within our timeline. Selecting the axis. The axis is going to be the Z-axis. After that's done, press OK. Now you should have a total of 2 more newly created hooks for our bottom design here. And this is what it should look like. The next thing we need to do here is to create the top piece for our design. So let's toggle back on our 3D printable cable organizer, the main component. Let's go ahead and create a new component. And let's name this to top. After that's done, let's create a new sketch. And what we can do here within Fusion is that we can use existing faces or existing bodies and faces that are in other components and use this as a reference to create new faces or sketches or new bodies in future or other components, if that makes sense. So for example, if we wanted to sketch on this face here, even though we are not working with the base component, we can still use this as a reference to start sketching. From here, let's go ahead and reorient our plane. And you should see that we are in the top-down view. And what we want to do now is create a circle from the origin, drag this out, and this is going to be 90 millimeters. Next, what we want to do is reorient our design here. And what we want to do is extrude this newly created profile within our component here. Now, if we press E on our keyboard, what we want to note here is that we want to make sure we select the appropriate profiles. Since we created a sketch here, or use an existing sketch, we want to make sure we select these 2 outside profiles in order to make this work. So for example, if you selected these 2 outside profiles, now we are using or referencing this outside profile we made, the newly created center diameter circle, and the face that we were using to extrude this off of. Additionally, you also have the center, but we don't need that at all. So from here, let's go ahead and set the direction to 2 sides. Let's set the side 1. Side 1 is going to be listed at 1 millimeter. And then side 2 is going to be listed at 4 millimeters. Make sure the operation is set to new body and press OK. Now you should have basically a disc that is right around the edges where our little chamfers were that we created in this top piece here. And that's exactly what we're looking for, as we're going to be using the sketch that we used to create those little chamfers to cut out the part for this very top piece here. So from here, what we want to do now is, by using an existing sketch that we created within the base component, we can go ahead and toggle down the base and toggle on sketch 3. Sketch 3 is what we use to create that chamfer or that little ledge to hook onto our top. So let's go ahead and toggle off the top so we can get a good look at the bottom component here. And what we want to do is select these 3 profiles. So it'll be 1, 2, and 3. Selecting the top, turning off the base again. Let's go ahead and reorient underneath our design, pressing E on our keyboard, and then just drag this out to the other side. You can either select this face or set the distance or the extent type to 2 object, and then selecting the bottom face here. After that's done, press OK. Now what we want to do here is, by doing the exact same thing, but for the opposite or basically the opposite of what we did for the bottom. So by going to our base once more, toggling back on sketch 3, let's toggle off the base, or excuse me, the body for the base, as we don't need that. Let's toggle off the top, and using this chamfer that we made, the part that we used to create the chamfer, we're going to do the exact same thing for the top. So let's go ahead and toggle back on our top. And from here, what we want to do is press E on our keyboard. And what we want to do now is change the starting distance and change this to offset. From here, we can offset this by 2 millimeters. And by any case it goes up, we actually want this to be going down, so be negative 2 millimeters. And the distance is going to be 2 millimeters. Now, as you can see, if we take a look at our design, we still have this bottom piece here, but it's more or less cut out or excuse me, if we still have this bottom piece here, but this top piece is cut out, and this is going to be the part that acts as our kind of our ledge or little hook for our chamfer to kind of fit in. After that's done, press OK. Now, of course, the same thing we did for the bottom for the chamfer, we also need to do for the top. So if we press S on our keyboard, type in chamfer, select this edge here and this edge, drag this out to 1.25, and press OK. Now, if we toggle back on our base and go to our main component, just zoom out really quick. And if we take a look at our design at a section analysis, using section analysis, we can see that now we have our bottom piece here, and then we have the top piece here. And that's exactly what we're looking for. We're looking to, for example, if we were to create some sort of movement for what this would look like, you have your little chamfer or your little hook for the bottom, and then you would rotate this around, and then you would pull it down. Same exact thing, going back up, and to lock it in place, you would rotate it inwards. But you guys get the idea. This is not the right way to do it. So now that we created a feature for one side on our disk at the very top, let's go ahead and create a circular pattern for the entire disk. So let's turn off the base. Let's go ahead and revolve around to the bottom piece of our design, pressing S on our keyboard, typing in circular pattern, selecting the objects, which is the last two features within our timeline, and selecting the axis to Z axis. Make sure the compute type is set to optimized, and press OK. Now you should have a total of 3 new cutouts. And from here, if we toggle back on our base, you can see that now we have our base kind of sitting flush with our top piece here. One thing I do want to note is that since we have the entirety of the base going up, for example, if I were to show you what this looks like, turning on our section analysis, although we have the chamfer still fitting in here, we still have this bottom piece still kind of protruding upwards here. So we need to go ahead and fix that. So let's go ahead and turn on our sketch for sketch 3 on the base component. Turning off our base. Make sure the top is turned on. From here, let's go ahead and reorient to find the sketch that we made. Let's toggle off the top. And what we want to do is select this outer or this inner ring here. So for example, if this is the inside of the design, meaning this is the hole for the cable organizer, this is the second ring on the outside, and then this is the last ring. We're going to want to extrude this very last ring here because this outer ring here is where the chamfers kind of sit. So for example, let's take this outside ring here, pressing E on our keyboard, turning on the top, and let's go ahead and extrude this to the other side. Press OK. Now you should have a kind of like a disc where these outer rings here, or this outer piece here, has kind of like this chamfer with an edge or a kind of like a hook. And that's exactly what we're looking for, because now if we were to turn on our bottom and turn on the main component, turn on section analysis, and now we can see that everything kind of fits in smoothly. For to take a good look once more, rotates out, come out, going up, and then locks in place. And that's what we're looking for. Let's turn off our section analysis and let's home view this. Now at this point, this is quite a confusing tutorial as I'm going back and forth between sketches and bodies. But just keep in mind, after you get the hang of watching this video several times over, you'll see that you start to see exactly what I'm doing. It's more or less repeating the exact same features or patterns for the bottom and repeating it for the top. That way they can be basically a polar opposite of each other in order for them to basically hook onto each other, if that makes sense. One additional thing I do want to note is that although we created our design, and although within Fusion the design appears to be perfect, meaning that if we were to hook these two within Fusion they would fit, when we actually 3D print it, due to the way 3D printing works and due to some dimensional accuracies, especially with 3D printing, very likely we're going to have a tough time trying to fit these in. So what we can do is try to create an offset or press pull some features here in order to make this a little bit easier for our design. So for example, if we were to toggle off the base, as we don't need that,
we can go ahead and press pull some of these features in order to make it a little bit easier. So for example, if we were to take a look at this ledge here, since that's where the hook is going to sit, we can select that face here, pressing S on our keyboard, typing in press pull. From here, you can see Fusion is going to allow us to basically offset the face. And if we were to try to drag this in, you can kind of see that now this face is kind of being pushed outwards. And that's exactly what we're looking for. Let's go ahead and create a distance of about negative 0.2. That way we have a 0.2 millimeters of clearance. And make sure the offset is set to new offset. After that's done, press OK. Make sure to repeat the exact same thing for all the other sides. Press pull, negative 0.2. That side will be offsetted by 0.2. And once more, negative 0.2. Okay. Now if we toggle back on our base, do a section analysis once more, you can see now we have a little bit of clearance for our design here. This is what we're looking for since we don't want this to be an extremely tight fit. More or less, if it's an extremely tight fit, then it's very likely going to have issues with printing. And if we do manage to 3D print it and they do fit, very likely they're going to be very difficult for them to release, if that makes sense. Let's go ahead and turn off the base. We can toggle back on the top. And maybe we can finish up the design by adding a chamfer onto these edges here. So pressing S on our keyboard, typing in chamfer, select this outer edge at the very bottom, and let's maybe drag this up to about 4. Pressing enter. Now you kind of have this like a circular ring with these chamfers on the outside, and that's what it looks like. Pretty cool. Now from here, let's toggle back on our base. Let's turn on the main component. And now we pretty much have our cable organizer. If we really wanted to call it a day, this could be it. But in order to complete this design, we can go ahead and add some more details. More specifically, since we're going to be putting cables in here, we can also create some hooks for those cables to latch onto. So now what we want to do is to create a new sketch. So right now I'm currently in the main components, which is the main component for both of these pieces here. And what we want to do now is create a new sketch on this face here using the top-down view within Fusion 360. From here, let's go ahead and create a new sketch. Select this top face, and then selecting the center diameter circle. Create the first circle. The first one's going to be 70 millimeters. The second circle is going to be 80 millimeters. And from here, we should have a total of 1, 2, 3 profiles. And now what we want to do is create a total of 3 lines. First line is going to be from the center going up. Second line is going to be from this outer ring here. It could be anywhere on the ring, just more or less make sure that they are parallel to the line here. And lastly, one more line on the right-hand side. And now you should have something that looks like this. If your lines are not straight, using the parallel constraint as mentioned earlier, you can go ahead and set them to parallel to each other. And if they're already parallel, you should see that little parallel icon show up on screen. From here, let's go ahead and set some dimensions. The line on the left is going to be 15. And the line on the right is also going to be 15. From here, let's also create 2 more lines, which is at these very outer ring here. Pressing L on our keyboard, selecting this line here, going up, once more, going up. This is going to be set to 2.5 millimeters, and this is going to be set to 2.5 millimeters. After that's done, finish sketch. Now you should have basically these newly created profiles that we can use here. Using those profiles, pressing E on our keyboard and selecting the distance to to object, and we're going to to object this to the bottom face or the bottom design that we made. Make sure the operation is set to cut, so that way you kind of have like this cutout for both the top and the bottom, and press OK. Now we should have basically a kind of like a ring around our disc, but it's kind of like a square rectangle ring, if that makes sense. So using the fillet command within Fusion, we can press S on our keyboard, type in fillet, and we can just go around these edges here. Now if we drag this in, you can see now we get this kind of like a nicer, rounder shape to our design, which is what we want. Keep in mind, if you go too far in, you're going to see it's going to show up as this issue here. So maybe 2.5 millimeters is what looks the best. And press enter. Now you should have something that looks like this. This is the part where you can fit your headphones in. You kind of tuck into this little groove of the design here. And if we wanted to, we can maybe add a chamfer for this outer lip here. And press OK. So now we have this kind of disc. And we could also create the same operation for the other side. Pressing S on our keyboard, typing in circular pattern, selecting the last 3 features within our timeline, selecting the axis to the Z axis, and you should see that we have a total of 3 more. Now, if you want 3, you can absolutely use 3. But let's just say you just want one on the other side. We can use the mirror operation instead. Selecting the object type to features, selecting the last 3, and press OK. Now you should have a total of 2 cutouts for both sides. That way when you have these cables being tucked in, you have, for example, if one loose end or loose cable ends up being on some weird side, for example, maybe like around here, you have this little circular part here to match it up to, or on the other side as well. Additionally, if we wanted to, we can add some fillets to this to make this a little bit nicer. So maybe one at this edge here. Maybe make this a little bit rounder. And press enter. Now we're pretty much done. This is our 3D printable cable organizer. From here, if we were to add some color to this, pressing A on our keyboard, this black. If we're to send this off to render, this is our final design. So now that we've created our final design, we can also send this off to print. So for example, let's go ahead and right click one of our components, send it off to our slicer, do the exact same thing for the other side. Let's reorient this so we have the bottom facing up. And if we were to slice this, so for example, slice. Total print time is going to be about 2.5 hours. Keep in mind, I am using a layer height of 0.808. So let's see what this looks like at a regular layer height. So for me, it's going to be about 2 hours, which is not too bad. But more or less, this is the general idea of this design. It's a fairly simple design and more or less can be extremely useful, especially if you have lots of cables lying around. But that said, that pretty much wraps up this video for Fusion 360.
So with that said, that pretty much wraps up today's tutorial. Let me know your guys' thoughts and opinions down below in the comment section of this video. And as well as if you guys still need feedback or help, feel free to join the 3D printing community with link in the description. And if you have any questions or concerns, you can always ask them within that community to get help with whatever you need. So with that said, if you guys want access to the STL files, make sure to join the community. And with that said, this is Brandon signing out. See you guys in the next one. Peace.